Welcome to Mum Abroad's YouTube channel, where I'm joined today by Simon Brampton. He's the owner of the language school Idiomas Advantage in Barcelona. With a first-class honours degree and a postgraduate in psychology, he's been working as a language teacher, trainer and translator for over 30 years. In 2020, his book, The 5 Key Strategies of Successful Bilingual Families, was published in English and in Spanish. This book is the fruit of his own experience of raising his son Marc, who's now 14, in English, and is also based on hundreds of interviews, conversations and observations, as well as comments and feedback that you can find on his dedicated blog. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Jane. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I look forward to speaking about the book and maybe helping a few people at the same time.
Simon, your book is aimed at heritage language parents living in a country that does not speak that language. Why did you decide to write the book in the first place?
Right, yeah, why did I decide? Well, I mean, to start with, I mean, I'd always been interested in language. And when I came to Spain back in 1989, I came to Catalonia, and it's actually a bilingual community. So immediately you're living in a place with 2 languages. And it got me thinking about how people interacted. And when it came round to the time when I got married and we were thinking of having a child, the thing that came to my mind was, well, you know, I really want to bring up Marc speaking English as well as I do. And I met a boy who'd in Barcelona, the son of a teacher that I know, and he spoke absolutely perfect English. He seemed like he'd never lived in Spain, but he had all his life. And I thought, well, what are the secrets of that? And I started looking around for books, etc. And I read a lot of books on the subject, but they all seemed to be very autobiographical, very anecdotal. How do I bring up a child? There was no real explicit instructions on how to bring up a child in a very simple, step-by-step guidebook type of way, like a recipe book. You open up, you say, right, that's what I do first, that's what I do second. And I saw a gap in the market, and I thought, well, if I were a parent that wanted to bring up a child, that's what I'd want to read. And after about 5 or 6 years, I started to write the book. But it's actually it took about another 10 years before I really started it and then sat down and wrote it when I was absolutely sure, based on my experience and everything I'd read, about the actual secrets or the recipe, let's say, for bringing up a child. So it's basically there was a gap in the market, and I don't think there's any other book. I don't want to sound like a little bit arrogant, but I don't think there's anything that's that simple. It's not made for dummies, but it explains very, very carefully, backed up with evidence, how to bring up a child in your language when you don't live in your own country. So yeah, that was the main reason.
So your book sets out 5 key strategies, as you mentioned.
Right.
The first of which is the one language, one parent approach. Mm-hmm. I have to say that I think this is the technique that's most well known. Why do you think that it's so popular in your opinion?
Yeah, the one parent, one language, the OPOL, as they call it, is the one you find, in fact, in all works, all literature. I think the reason that it's so popular, and the one I actually really do recommend, is that it's unambiguous. It doesn't cause any mixing. It doesn't cause any confusion for the child. You know, I'm English. My native language is English. I speak English to my child, and that's it. I don't start saying, sometimes I speak Spanish, sometimes I speak whatever. It's just one language. It means that the child gets maximum exposure to the language, and there's no ambiguity or mixing, as I say. The second strategy, which is the one where the child, what language does the child reply to you in? This is where what I call, one language to you. And again, it's like one parent, one language. For me, it's absolutely critical and very clear that the child has to reply to you only in your language. So if I speak English to my son replies to me only in English.
So Simon, what are the main reasons that children don't reply to their heritage language parent in that language, would you say?
Yeah, well, this is really the $1 million question. It's the key question, really. Because, and I think it's the main problem that parents find, sadly, that they really want the child to reply to them. There are 2 main reasons why this doesn't happen. I think the first reason is just the amount of exposure and input. In the first 12 months, normally children start to speak around about 12 months. There are big differences. Sometimes they speak a little bit later, especially if they're bilingual children, and parents get worried about this. They shouldn't. It's all normal. They just take a little bit longer. In the case of Marc, he started speaking around 12 months. It's when they begin speaking that this is where it's really important. First, if they have a lot of input, a lot of exposure, it shouldn't ever arise that the child will speak to you in the local language, as if they should just speak to you in your language. If that doesn't happen, then you need a very, very, very clear strategy to overcome that. So one is make sure there's exposure. The other one is, let's say, nipping it in the bud. From the very beginning, don't let the child speak to you or the baby in the local language. They must speak to you in your own heritage language. What happens is, though, and what I've heard a lot, is that the parents go, oh, they're just replying. I'll just reply back. It doesn't really matter. They're young, they're little babies. Oh, it doesn't matter. I don't want to really impose myself on them. It's just normal. It's natural. In fact, it's not normal or natural for your child to speak a different language to you. And the way to do it is not accept it. In the very beginning, when they're very young, you just say, oh, what was that, Marc? Didn't understand that. What was that? Did you mean ice cream? You want ice cream? Yeah, okay, well, ask Daddy for ice cream. He goes, helado. What are you saying? No. What do you want? What do you want? Okay, don't worry about it. Oh, okay, big tantrum. All right, okay, big tantrum. Now what do you want? Ice cream, please, Daddy. Great, ice cream. Okay, do you want chocolate flake in that? 99? Yeah. So you begin by nipping it. You don't let them get away with it. You can just do it at the very beginning with the correction, getting them to repeat to you. But if you just let it go, they'll just continue like that. And you'll set up a pattern, which I'm sorry to say is very, very difficult to turn around. I've spoken to other parents who've done everything bar bribing their children. I think they've even tried that, but they will not go back to that. I have several friends, a Danish friend, for example, whose daughter never speaks to him in Spanish. He has always spoken in Danish to her. And I think when she goes to Denmark, she's able to get by a little bit in Danish, so she's a passive bilingual. So at the very, very least, if you haven't been able to do it, or for whatever reason, then continue speaking your language, because that's still a huge added value and advantage and benefit for the child as they grow older. And who knows, you may be lucky and they come round and they speak to you. Giving lots of input and trying to nurture and foster that channel of communication really is the secret.
So you talking a little bit about children when they're younger, about how to encourage them to speak. What about when they get older? Are there any other kind of recommendations for encouraging them to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, well, we've got the part of input, and then we've got the part of output. So this is really the third and fourth key strategy. So they go together in a way. If you want the child to speak, first of all, they need the language to actually come out with the language, to come out and speak to you. Otherwise, then they're not going to be able to say anything anyway. So one of the acronyms I use in the book is the ABC. A, always, B, and C, conversing, is the thing that the parent has just got to continue speaking, being maybe too chatty, too talkative to the child, not leaving too many silences, being interactive with your children as much as you can. None of this just watching. If they're playing in a playground, you're just sitting there watching and not doing anything. You need to get involved and play with them. Oh, you're on a slide, go down the slide. Now on the swing, do you want me to push you higher? Sorry, what? So it's constantly doing things. When you're watching TV, it can be a bit annoying, but you can actually maybe speak to them when they're doing that. So the first thing is to make sure you've got an interactive situation, and then you want to make them, let's say, to foster, encourage them to speak. You need to talk about things that they like, obviously, about the things in the beginning, could be their toys, their games, etc., and ask open-ended questions. Why did you like that? What else? Things like that. Not just yes or no questions. Did you enjoy it? Yeah. Would you like to do that again? Yeah. So you need to say, why did you enjoy that? What would you like to do this afternoon? Tell us everything you want to do. What are you planning to do? So it's really giving that CTT, children talking time, giving them lots of space. Another thing that's important is making sure that you don't criticize them or you don't overcorrect when they're speaking, because it's very easy when they come out, oh, I broke my bicycle. No, can I just go back on that? That's the irregular past tense of break. What you have to say is, so things like that. I broke my bicycle. So you can actually, what I do is what I call something that's non, it's not very direct. It's indirect. Let's say correction. Say, oh, okay. So you broke your bicycle, did you? Is that right? What did you do again? Oh, I broke my. So they might actually come back with the words. So it's to listen, not overcorrect, be understanding, to nod, to use active listening, to encourage them to speak. So that's really the secret of it. But make sure you're with them enough so that it actually happens, because you are probably going to be the only person that they're going to have contact with, unless they're lucky enough to, to have friends or whatever at school, or who are foreign children. That's very, very, very important. Does that answer the question there?
It does. So encouragement is key, and a little bit of perseverance as well, probably.
Absolutely. Well, that's the fifth point, is perseverance, commitment, belief. Are all those? Is the fifth one, the language for life? Absolutely, yeah.
So you're talking there about children speaking, but that's just one side of a language, isn't it? What about reading and writing? How does that fit into this?
Yeah, it's actually quite a controversial topic, and much more than I thought. I thought when I got into it that talking to other, well, I mean, because I'm in the teaching world, I was speaking to other teachers, and I just said a matter of factly to a Dutch teacher I had, who was bringing up her child in Dutch, and I said, "Wow, how are you doing with the writing, etc." He said, "Oh, I'm not writing. I'm not doing any writing." Why wouldn't you write? No, they can all get confused. I want to make sure she does Spanish first, and I took it on board. But we had almost a little bit of a confrontation, an argument. Okay, there are two ways of looking at writing. If let's have a look at reading and writing. If your child can't read in your language or write, you could say that they're illiterate, which is not a very nice word to use, but they could actually illiterate in your language. And I thought, I do not want that to happen. So how do you do it? You bring up your child. First of all, you start with the reading, and in my book I go through every stage from the first time you read your book. Bedtime stories should be obligatory. You should be there every night with your nursery rhymes, and then your those typical children's books, reading together, and you can turn that into eventually the child reading with you. You can change the books into ones where, and that you can get them to point at the pictures and say, "Oh, what word's that? Do you recognise? I just said, forest. Which word is that? Or path? Or little red? What's that? Little Red Riding Hood." And little by little, you integrate it into. So I don't think there's much of a discussion about reading, perhaps, but the writing part, as I say, if you can't write the language, I think you're missing out on a couple of things. First of all, it's all part of the productive part, the output. I mean, one thing is speaking, but also writing is another output. So it's more practice in the language. It's being able to form the sentences, becoming more literate, becoming more eloquent when you're writing, and that will transfer into speaking as well. Trying to teach children to write, or to read, has become very controversial in England at the moment, because of the phonic method versus the whole word approach, where I taught Marc using both, actually, where you actually, if you see a word, you spell it out. It's a tiger, tiger, or things like that. In fact, English has got 75% of English words actually have some sort of rule to them. I know a lot of people, maybe in Italy or in Spain, would be surprised about that, because the languages are so regular. But the language can be taught. But I can understand a lot of parents would say, "Yeah, but I'm not a teacher. They've got a teacher for that at school." yeah, but is the teacher teaching them your language, or are they just teaching the local language? And it just seems a pity that they're missing out on that, just from an output point of view to start with. It just gives that extra added value, it gives an extra benefit to the child in general. So I think definitely encourage that. Don't worry about the child mixing the two languages. I never found Marc having problems with English and Spanish. I think maybe because they were very different. The alphabet's the same, obviously, but the systems themselves were different in the spelling, and I didn't find any problems. I mixed phonic with whole word approach as exceptions to the rule. So yeah, start them reading first from as soon as you can. Reading even before they can read, just like when they're like 0 years old, and build it up where you're reading together, and eventually they might even be able to take over. It's really, really important. And so it's all part of education, but I can understand why some parents might not think they'd be very good at it. But here's the big news: you're better than you think you are. I mean, parents are teaching all the time. You teach children how to cook, maybe how to, I don't know, people teach them how to knit and sew, or you teach them hopefully how to do the washing up. So you're teaching children how to do things all the time. Reading and writing, you might think it's too academic, but it's not. Parents that do it actually take it on. And there are videos these days, and my book has got a lot of ideas on how to start and go through and actually teach a child to read and to write. So yeah, it's an integral part of speaking and listening. Reading and writing should all be there. A whole person approach. Okay.
Simon, you have a whole chapter on artificial bilingualism in your book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what that is exactly? It sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, actually, artificial bilingualism sounds like it's something that robots would speak of. It sounds extremely negative, I'm bringing my child up with artificial bilingualism. So what? That sounds awful. Why are you doing it to them? Yeah, so artificial. It's when you bring up a child in a language that isn't your first language, isn't your native language. I have two people that in my school, director of studies and a person that does social media and marketing. They're both Spanish. They have, I would say, a proficiency level in Spanish. In Spanish, native Spanish speakers in English, and they have quite a noticeable, let's say, Spanish accent. But in both cases, they brought up, in one case, the daughter, in the other case, 3 children speaking English, and it's not their language at all. They just learnt it. They've lived abroad for a little while and they have a proficiency level, but they're definitely not bilingual level. Don't speak the language perfectly. Both of them make mistakes, but they've done it. So this is bring up a child in a language that's not your language. That's what it is. And then it's quite controversial because people would say, that's ridiculous, because why are you doing that anyway? And I think I go through the main reasons in my book. Most of them say, well, there's a love of the language. That's one, they wanted their children to enjoy the culture, etc. But that's one thing doesn't really exist for this artificial bilingualism. For us, we're transmitting, as I say, we call it a heritage language because it's transmitting culture, traditions, identity, ancestry, everything of our culture and everything is going child into the child. In this case, there's none of that whatsoever. So you think, well, why? And it's normally for usefulness in life. It's a tool. It's an added value and benefit for the child, especially English these days. The other thing you could do is to get what I call partner support. If, for example, if for example, my wife spoke perfect English, which she doesn't, she speaks Catalan to Marc, in fact. You could have the other parent can also speak in English in a sort of an artificial bilingualism way to give support. Imagine if I were not at home all day and I get in very late, there'd be very little input. But if my wife spoke English to my son, then he'd be getting that extra input, even if it weren't bilingual level. Obviously, the nearer you get to that proficiency bilingual level, the better for the quality of the input, etc. But it's I don't know, for me, it's been fascinating. I've interviewed a lot of parents about this and living in Spain, and I'm quite amazed that all of them have been able to bring up I have 6 interviews in the book, which are really interesting to read. You can see how they've brought up their children speaking a language that isn't their language. So it is actually amazing. Yeah.
I think it's really nice for parents to be able to foster that love of languages within children, even if it isn't their native language. Simon, on your website, you say to really speak a language well, you need to live it and love it. Can you
That's right.
that?
Yeah, I mean, living it and loving it is absolutely getting totally immersed, really, in the language. It's everything about it. You know, as I said before, it's the traditions, it's the culture, it's the music, it's the food, it's expressing all of those things, the sounds in that language. What you're giving to the child is, as I say, a heritage language. And if you can transmit that love for your language and your culture to your child, then I think that's an incredibly amazing situation. It's a gift that you're giving your children that, you know, I wish I'd had, you know, being brought up monolingually for so long and having to learn Spanish and Catalan, you know, for long hours of studying. But it would have been that our children, I think, have an amazing advantage and a gift, and living it and loving it. And that means also, if you can, spending as much time as you can back in your country. It could seem a little bit of a sacrifice if you like the warmer climate in Europe in the summer rather than going back to the UK, which can be a little bit dreary sometimes. But there's sacrifices you make for your children. Come on. So that's a good thing. And I would say that the difference, the main difference that has made the biggest difference to the people I've interviewed and I've met, is that the children that have spent the most time in Britain, especially a whole summer living with the family there, even when they've been going to a state school where they get practically zero input in English, they speak perfect English. They are indistinguishable from another English child. It is unbelievable, and that's another thing that really struck me from speaking to a few children. But you know, but how long were you speaking to the child? All day? I mean, what input? I said no. I think, and they just said no. We spent 3 months summer in England. I mean, that hasn't been possible in our case, but we've always gone back as much as possible. So Marc can meet his many cousins and the family back there in sunny Bournemouth on the south coast. So living it and loving it is embracing the language for what it is and enjoying speaking and transmitting everything that goes with it. So that's what I would say to parents is have fun. The journey has begun, as the little slogan goes. It's enjoy the experience. An amazing thing, if you think about it, that a child can actually speak 2 languages, and as well as all the benefits that come with bilingualism.
So, Simon, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of bilingualism. There's a huge amount of research that's been done on the subject. I think we're very aware of that. And we all agree that there are many benefits. But what would you say are the most obvious benefits?
Yeah, that's right. You're right. Absolutely right about the amount of research. The interesting thing I think we ought to think about is that it hasn't really been thought of as an advantage through history, at least not in the West. In the 20th century, and we think of the 20th century as if it was like a historical period in the past, although it is obviously, it was seen as somewhat disruptive for a child that wanted to learn efficiently or effectively. For example, they think, having being bilingual could create split personality, schizophrenia, dyslexia, learning difficulties, lower acquisition, etc., etc. A lot of the studies were done with immigrants that just arrived in the country, and they may have had lower levels of education in general. And I think it was very, very unfair the way the studies were carried out. So they ignored the positive ones, and they focused, I think, for government policies or whatever reason on that, maybe because of assimilation into the country. Since the 21st century, and with the advent neuropsychology, neurolinguistics, and basically more studies. What they found is that bilinguals are smarter than other people. So I would say you're smart, not smart, but you're smarter than you would have been maybe. Heightened cognitive skills, so you're able to think in a more agile way. You can solve mental problems quicker. You're able to these sorting games. You're able to sort them out quicker. Executive functions, things like planning, attention in general. When your drivers seem to who are bilingual seem to be able to concentrate better when they're driving, whether they're men or women. Actually, that wasn't done. Another thing I would say, and I've read before, and I'd like to point out, is that the child learns that a word and an object are really separate things. So you say, oh, there's a chair. So that chair is a chair. It's not. A chair could be una silla, una cadira, un chaise, stool in Afrikaans. So things. They get the idea that language isn't fixed to an object, and it makes them think in a much different way. They also say that it can put off the onset of Alzheimer's and dementia, not just in old people, but in old people, obviously, and also people tend to recover more quickly from strokes as well. I don't know exactly how they work that out based on also the level of bilingualism. They try to sort people by different types, but the overwhelming evidence is that there is absolutely advantages in all of those cognitive, executive, and the delay in Alzheimer's and other memory disorders.
I think there are also some of, let's call them hidden benefits, if you like. With a language, you also have access to culture, to traditions, to different experiences, for example. So would you agree with that as well?
Absolutely, yes. What I've, as I've mentioned in different parts of the interview, that the language is the heritage language, which does include the culture, the beliefs, the identity, the traditions, the ancestry. So you're passing that on with bilingualism. I would say even if there were no benefits, as long as they weren't obviously negative things, if it was just, you say, well, being bilingualism is exactly the same, it would be a justification in itself to be bilingual because of that, because you can speak to your family, in your parents' family in their country, and all your relatives. I mean, that alone, I think, justifies it. But apart from that, you also have the useful parts of being bilingual, which is being able to travel around the world, especially if you're speaking a major language, job opportunities. They're all positive things that people think, oh, well, bilinguals, okay, maybe smarter, but the rest of it for me is equally or even more important than just bilingualism makes you smarter. I think that's how I would look at it. So yeah, it's for me, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Parents really need to, believe it or not, it's all of the research proves time and again that it's worth it. It's also useful, and it's worth putting into place those 5 strategies plus other ones like choosing schools and etc. when bringing up your child. So if you have any doubts, there's no need. Just go for it, and the benefits will be there. It'll be a wonderful journey, and it's a huge gift to your children. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
If nothing else, the more languages you speak, the more people you can communicate with. Full stop. I mean, that's enough, isn't it? Really,
yes.
If you don't even think about anything else,
it's a massive advantage.
Really, really interesting to hear what you have to say. Fascinating to hear about your book as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to put along the bottom your website address, bilingualuniverse.com. If anybody would like to find out more about your book or to carry on the conversation with you, they can contact you via that website. So,
absolutely, yeah. Please feel free to contact me or to check out some of the blogs that I'm writing, etc. And yeah, I'd be absolutely delighted to help people. I really do like helping mums and dads who are in that situation where they don't know what to do. It's a great feeling to be able to help people with bringing up their children in their language. Yeah,
that's very clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today.